Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode.
In today's episode, in our final top 10 of the off-season, I was joined by Ben Isaacs as we rank our top 10 worst ever Super Bowl winning head coaches. Ben puts a strong case forward for one of his nominees.
You put those facts out, then it should be like, whoa, he should be, are we talking about a Hall of Fame head coach? Clearly not.
And I have a major issue with one of Ben's selections.
For me personally, I don't think I'd put anyone who's won two Super Bowls. In my opinion, I think it's hard enough to win one Super Bowl, let alone two.
As we count down our top 10. Hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis. And today's episode is all about ranking our top 10 worst ever Super Bowl head coaches of all time. Now, with me, I've got a returning guest. Back with me is Ben Isaacs. Ben Isaacs, how are you?
Great. I've enjoyed and also hated doing all the research for this because it felt so stressful. Because we're looking at Super Bowl winning head coaches, and I may never be a Super Bowl winning head coach. So I feel like to be judging these people and putting them on a worst list, it does require the context, right? Of like, they've still won a Super Bowl. Like, everyone here on my list has won a Super Bowl, but my plan has been rank all these guys who have a Super Bowl ring as a head coach, and what would that bottom 10 be? And I've had to use particular criteria. I've had it that I don't care how good they are as a coordinator. So if they're a genius coordinator and then a mediocre head coach, I don't care about the coordinator stuff, just as a head coach. And I don't care how good they were as a college coach if they also have that on their CV. But it was fun and stressful. And I've got a whole list of names, and I'm hoping I don't even have to say some of them so that I don't have people on social media saying, I can't believe you've done this. I love this guy. That night that my team won this particular Super Bowl is one of the greatest nights of my life. And here you are saying he's one of the worst head coaches in the history of the sport. I don't need that in my life, but this is just a perfect off-season podcast. So thanks for having me on.
Well, no problem at all. I mean, this is actually something we planned in our last episode where you came on for our top 10 games to look forward to the most in 2025. Do have a listen to that if you haven't already. And we discussed literally off camera after recording about just some bad Super Bowl winning head coaches, and two of them definitely going to be mentioned by at least me, if not you. And we just think, you know what, let's do a episode all about that. And this will be our last top 10 of the off season, because our next episode will be our season previews, where we get a season preview episode for every team with a fan of every team. So that's our third or fourth installment of the season previews now. So they'll be coming after this episode, and we'll look forward to bringing you all of those once again. Now, before we get on to the episode, let's head back to On This Day. Now, on this day, back in 1931, the Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which is home of the formerly named Cleveland Indians and Cleveland Browns, was built, and it was later demolished in 1996. And in 1974, NFL players went on strike for 41 days, challenging the Rizal rule, but had to wait until 1977 for new collective bargaining agreement. And the likes of Andrew Van Ginkel, DJ Reader, and Javondre Campbell were all born. Now, usual process about our top 10s, we'll each give 5 each, and at the end, we will try and compile a table from 10 to 1 of our worst Super Bowl winning head coaches. And like Ben, I only on one method of approach. I'm avoiding anyone who's won more than one, because I feel like if you won more than one, then absolutely fair play to you. Ben, you might think differently to me, but
Oh yeah, I do, Andy. I do feel differently. And I'm hoping we get to that guy.
Well, you're the guest, so I'll let you go first. This could be the guy, this could be someone else, but give me your first nomination for the top 10 worst Super Bowl winning head coaches.
So I'm going to go for the one who I think is the absolute worst, and he is one of the least famous ones on this list. He's probably the least famous Super Bowl winning head coach, and it's Don McCafferty. Now, you can't talk about Don McCafferty without bringing up Don Shula. And Andy and I were texting earlier today, and I think Andy was worried I was going to put Don Shula in this list. Absolutely not. Don Shula's a legend. Now, Don Shula built a great Baltimore Colts team in the 1960s. Before he was a legend in Miami, he was a fantastic head coach in Baltimore. So the Baltimore Colts, he took over there when he was 33 years old, unheard of at the time. I know I'm talking about Don Shula, but please, you really need the context. So he came close to winning a couple of NFL titles in Baltimore. And then when he finally did win an NFL title, it was in the days where that just got you a ticket to the Super Bowl. And they lost to the Jets, the famous Joe Namath Jets of Super Bowl III. A year later, he left because the Dolphins offered a lot of money, but also he'd really fallen out with the ownership in Baltimore. The new Colts coach was this Don McCafferty. So he took Shula's brilliant team to the Super Bowl in his first season, had a bit of a fluky win against the Cowboys. So here he is. He's had one season and won a Super Bowl. In the rest of his career, he won just 18 more games. 18 more games after that first season. Shula won 2 Super Bowls in a row after that Colts one. But I think Shula should get the credit for that Super Bowl. He should be the only head coach to win 3 Super Bowls in a row, because Don McCafferty's ring should have just gone to Don Shula on principle. That was Don Shula's team. Don Shula, easily one of the greatest coaches of all time. Don McCafferty, absolutely, in my eyes, the worst head coach to ever win a Super Bowl.
He's absolutely someone I thought about as well. I mean, looking at his overall career win-loss record, it's 28-17-2. So I think, you know, he may have won 4 out of his 5 postseason games, but the fact he, you know, it's not even like that much of a legacy. If you only coached what's that going to be, 40, 50, regular season games, I think in total, if you go regular season and postseason, it's about 52, if my maths is correct. So I think, yeah. I mean, obviously, he won a Super Bowl in his first season, but you've correctly pointed out that maybe he doesn't get all the credit he should have for the. He gets credit that he shouldn't get from that win.
Yeah, I want to say one thing about him as well is that he died while he had a heart attack mowing his lawn. So everyone, like, it is lawn mowing time of year. If you're like me, you're mowing that lawn maybe twice a week. Just be careful out there, guys. I do not want you to get Don McCafferty'd and miss future episodes.
Yeah, I think that's sort of one reason why potentially I did look at him maybe lower down on my list, was because the fact that he did have his career cut short, and he could have easily had another 5-10 years in the league and maybe one other one. But either way, you can't ignore the record he had. And everything we talked about today. So yeah, absolutely a worthy contender. Now, I think for me, I had a few very good contenders. Some that I didn't know before I did my research. Some I very much did know. Now, the one guy I want to get out there, because even though he's out of all the 10 I've got in, he's probably got the best record on paper. But I think he could have done a whole lot more. Mike McCarthy, formerly of the Green Bay Packers and Dallas Cowboys. He had 12 winning seasons in his career, unlike a lot of these people I've got in my list. But I feel like with the Packers, with Aaron Rodgers there,
he had Brett Favre. He had Brett Favre as well.
Yeah, and he's won 1 Super Bowl, granted. But I feel like, I want to say first of all, actually, I think, all these coaches I'm going to mention are good coaches. To win a Super Bowl as a head coach, you've obviously got the talent. So I want to put out there that I'm not saying he's been a bad head coach, but I think the fact that he's had, you mentioned Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and then, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and the good running back room at the Cowboys a few years ago, to not even I think he won 1 playoff game with the Cowboys, and towards the end of his time with the Packers, he just kept losing big game after big game and wild card game after wild card game. And I just feel like he was almost a bit cowed by Rodgers. I feel like, don't get wrong, 2010 was before I properly watched NFL. So maybe I'm wrong here, but from what I've watched on A Football Life, America's Game as well, we look at the Packers when they won it that year in 2010, I want to say. I feel like Aaron Rodgers carried him a lot. And I feel like there are certain times in sport where you get that. But I do feel in McCarthy's case, to only make, to just not even win, to only make one Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. And I think there was a game against the Cardinals. He scored 45 points and they lost against the Cardinals. Yeah, I think the fact there was so many disappointments, so many losses in early stages of the playoffs for me. McCarthy, I don't think he's number one, but I want to get him in there because I feel like he's someone that most of the audience will know, and like maybe my next few I'm going to mention. And yeah, I feel like he is, as a head coach, I don't think anything. Even there's one guy I'm going to mention later on who's got a famous play, and I can't think anything of McCarthy's coaching career that I can look back on and go, he did that. I can't think anything at all that I can look back on his legacy and go, this is something cool that he did.
No, and the season they did get to the Super Bowl and win it, that wasn't even a particularly good regular season. They didn't win the division. They got lucky a number of times in the playoffs. They were good in the Super Bowl itself. But Mike McCarthy, for all those years, so he's one of the only coaches to ever take one team to the playoffs 8 years in a row. He won more games in Green Bay than Vince Lombardi. You put those facts out, then it should be like, whoa, he should be, are we talking about a Hall of Fame head coach? Clearly not. He wins all these games, has a great win percentage in the regular season. He doesn't have a winning record in the postseason, despite having Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Dak Prescott. He's never been like, oh, I haven't got a quarterback. I haven't got the roster. He's had that. In his final 6 seasons, I mean, he's out of work right now, but I'm sure he's looking to get back into it. He's only made the playoff 3 times in the most recent 6 seasons, 1 playoff win in 6 years. Now, how many fan bases around the NFL right now wish they had Mike McCarthy as their head coach? Probably 0. And that's pretty telling considering he has won a Super Bowl. I doubt anyone's looking and thinking, oh, we're Mike McCarthy away from being a contender. Nobody's thinking that. He was absolutely on my list of like slam dunks. This guy has to be in there. Yes. So I with you 100% on that.
Well, he's actually one of the guys that we talked about in that aforementioned post-recording chat we had. There's one more that I'm sure will get mentioned in a few later on in the episode. But yeah, absolutely. I think with everything we've talked about, I think he is absolutely a worthy candidate in our top 10 list. Ben, back to you for your second nominee for our top 10 worst Super Bowl winning head coaches.
I'm going to go with the guy on this list I actually dislike the most. And that is Barry Switzer, who won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys, something that Mike McCarthy couldn't do. He was a great college coach at Oklahoma, who by his own admission was pretty much coasting when he was in the NFL. Troy Aikman, Hall of Fame head coach of the Cowboys, hated Barry Switzer. There's a famous story where Michael Irvin and some younger players, they turned up at practice having only finished drinking at like 6 a.m. And as you can imagine, they weren't really with it. And Aikman said to Switzer, you got to do something about this. And he was like, what am I going to do? Cut Michael Irvin? And Aikman was like, no, but you can cut those other guys. Make everyone run until they just puke their guts out. Like, make them suffer. And Switzer was like, no way, I'm not going to do that. And I think it's because Switzer related to the idea of basically being there to have fun and not push yourself too much. So they practiced for about another 20 minutes. And then Switzer said, I can see some of you aren't right today. Let's finish early and try again tomorrow. And Aikman's there thinking, I want to win loads of Super Bowls. And I've now got a head coach who's like, we're not really feeling it today. Let's not bother practicing. The Cowboys had been easily the best team in the league under Jimmy Johnson from the early 90s onwards. He'd fallen out with Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson had, so he got canned. Jerry then hired Switzer, who'd been out of football for a few years because he'd been forced to resign from the University of Oklahoma because of various scandals, lots of them, too many to name. Switzer had been an assistant coach at Arkansas when Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson were both players there, so they all knew each other. Jerry said that he could find 500 coaches who could win a Super Bowl with a roster that good. Well, one of those 500 was Barry Switzer, and I think Jerry Jones was proved right. There probably were 500, and Barry Switzer was probably around 450th out of those. He took a team that had won the past 2 Super Bowls in dominant fashion, and he then took them to defeat in the NFC Championship game, which was a real blow to them. Then they won the Super Bowl the next year, a bit of a weird Super Bowl. They beat the Steelers. There were some weird interceptions, strange game. The Steelers completely messed it up. The Cowboys were better than the Steelers, but people thought, did the Steelers throw this game? They played so badly. So Barry Switzer, he's got now a Super Bowl ring. A year later, they got upset by the Panthers in the divisional round. Bear in mind, the Panthers had only existed for a couple of years at this point. They still had an expansion roster. They had no business beating the Cowboys. The Cowboys were so talented, and he couldn't do anything with them. A year later, they finished 6-10. A team with perhaps the best roster in the league, 6-10, and then he was gone. He was a rubbish NFL head coach. And I think that, like, McCafferty, I don't think he was any great shakes, everything I've read, but Switzer, I was there for it. I remember watching it, seeing it all start to go wrong. If you want to know more about Barry Switzer, watch the episode of A Football Life with Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman hates the guy, so angry about it all. Aikman knows he could have had, say, 5 rings, but he had 3 because of Barry Switzer.
You know what? I was doing my research. I don't know how I missed him because I looked at all the winning teams, every coach, and I looked up the ones I didn't know in their history. And Barry Switzer, I knew a bit about because of that Aikman documentary. I don't know how I forgot about him. But I suppose that avoids me mentioning my controversial ones. So that's somewhat of a silver lining to all of this. I mean, to be fair, his record stands as, 3 winning seasons out of 4, 3 playoff seasons out of 4. But when he mentioned about Troy Aikman and his dislike and how Jerry Jones, who doesn't get a lot of things right, but that's one thing he maybe has got right because it's maybe not the best. And only 4 years as the coach, you think if he was that good, someone else would have snapped him up after his time at the Cowboys. I think that itself is a clear indication of maybe his skill set and personality. Now, my last one was a modern one. I'm going a further way back for my next contender. I'm going back and I'm probably going to really pronounce this guy's name. He's sadly no longer with us. I'm going for former New York Jets head coach Weeb Ewbank. Now, people are probably wondering, who the hell is this? But we all know the famous play, or the famous game, I should say, not play, the famous game where the Jets beat the Colts, which is, funny enough, his old team, when Joe Namath made that famous proclamation that they were going to beat the Colts and surprise everyone. A game that really changed end of our history in terms of the AFC and NFC rivalry. But he's in the Hall of Fame, but he's had in his whole regular season career only 1 more win than a loss. In total, he had this is even taking into account before the Super Bowl era began, when his time with the Colts from 54 to 62 and Jets from 63 to 73. He had 130 wins, 129 losses. Now, the fact that, first of all, like I said before, these are all good coaches, but someone's got to go in this list. And I feel like if you're a head coach who's had just as many losses as wins in your career, you've got to be in there somewhere in this top 10 list. I mean, he had 20 seasons as a coach in the NFL, only 7 winning seasons, had no winning season from 1961 to 1967, which I've got that wrong, actually, I think, because he did win the Super Bowl in that era. Or maybe he didn't, actually. Maybe that was afterwards. It was, pardon me, that was afterwards. It was 68 when the Jets won it. So
Yep.
Yeah, the 7-year, 6-year absence from having a winning season. He only won a playoff game with the Jets. So, they won the Super Bowl and only had 2 playoff seasons with the Colts. And he was there for good 6-7 years. And in total, with the Baltimore Colts, 59 wins, 52 losses, 1 tie. With the Jets, 71 wins, 77 losses, and 6 ties. That in the regular season alone. In the postseason, 2 wins with the Jets. In that season, they won the Super Bowl against the Colts. But he had only 1 other playoff season, and that was the year after they went 1 and done, lost to the Chiefs in back then what was called the interdivisional playoff round. They went 4-10, 6-8, 7-7, 4-10, and for me, I don't know why he's in the Hall of Fame. Maybe because he had that, the game against the famous game against the Colts. I don't know, but you think about, I see this asked all the time on Twitter and YouTube about if you could put someone in that isn't in the Hall of Fame and someone out that is in the Hall of Fame, he'd be a contender for being kicked out because I don't know really how he's in. I mean, he did win 2 NFL championships with the Colts, but That's it. I mean,
So here's the thing with Weeb Eubank and his kind of place in NFL history. So obviously, most people will know how Super Bowl III kind of really changed the Super Bowl. If the Jets hadn't won that game, the Super Bowl might not be what it is today. And that might sound crazy, but it was at that point, people thought, well, no NFL team is ever going to lose to an AFL team. And the Jets winning that, all of a sudden, the Super Bowl seemed like a big deal. Like, oh, look what can happen. So he's significant there, even, in terms of narrative. And if you go back to those Colts teams of the 50s, the 1958 game, they beat the Giants, sorry. And it was considered to be, at the time, the best game in NFL history. And you speak to some people, and they will still say that's the greatest game in NFL history. And it was very significant. I believe it was the first championship game broadcast all across America. So he happened to win two of the most significant games in the first half of the NFL's first century, basically. So I think he's in the Hall of Fame more for those two moments than his career as a whole, because he had those two great seasons in Baltimore, winning back-to-back NFL championships, although went 9-3. It wasn't like they were, beating absolutely everybody, but they had those two. And then he had two good seasons with the Jets, winning a Super Bowl and then losing to the Chiefs in the playoffs. And you take those out, and he was nothing, really, which is, bad. But his place in NFL history, I think, is secured, and his place in the Hall of Fame is more for having those two games that proved to be so important for the sport as a whole.
Yeah, that is fair. I mean, I'm still, maybe you could argue maybe you shouldn't be high on our list, maybe, I don't know, maybe low down, but yeah, I just feel like, even though he had the moment, I think you look at his overall career, not exactly a great one. He's even like Joe Namath. Joe Namath had that great moment against the Colts, but his stats aren't great. If you look at his stats as the quarterback, they're not great. I think he had more interceptions and touchdowns in his career, but I stand by him being in the Hall of Fame because he is someone that did have one of the most famous moments in history. And the same thing is why I feel like Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Fame, because he had two amazing moments against the Patriots, the Tyree catch and the Manningham catch. So I feel like maybe I was harsh saying he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but certainly our top 10 worst winning coaches, I feel like definitely should be involved.
So for my next one, I think I'm just going to be not deliberately controversial. Maybe that's harsh, but I'm going to say the guy who has more than one ring.
Okay.
And I'm going to go in feet first here, and I'm just going to get it out. I'm going to get it off my chest. And it's George Seifert. And he had 2 rings as a head coach with the 49ers, and he has the 5th highest win percentage in history for head coaches with at least 100 wins. And I'm putting him on this list because he inherited not just a team and a roster from Bill Walsh, but a whole ethos. Walsh built the 49ers organization into what it was in the 1980s. He was so involved in creating that dynasty that it wasn't just, he was a great coach and then Seifert had some players. Everything, the whole structure, the way the 49ers worked, the way that they ran the organization better than anybody else in the NFL in the 80s was because of Bill Walsh. And when he decided he wanted to step back, he basically handed the car keys of a Rolls Royce to Seifert because he was a very safe pair of hands. He'd been the defensive coordinator there. He had Joe Montana as his quarterback and Steve Young as the backup. He had the best roster in the league, the best setup in the league, the best quarterback, and he had the quarterback succession plan. A lot of the things I was saying about Jimmy Johnson creating a fantastic team and then Barry Switzer, who was a mug, getting to win a Super Bowl with them, some of this is George Seifert, but George Seifert wasn't a mug. But he quickly won a Super Bowl with Montana, as was expected. Then Jimmy Johnson and the Cowboys overtook them. So I'm glad I did it in this order. Then, as I've said, Jimmy Johnson left the Cowboys. So Seifert immediately won another Super Bowl while Barry Switzer was trying to figure out how to be an NFL head coach. Barry Switzer then won that Super Bowl, and George Seifert was then kind of in a bit of trouble. He won one with Steve Young after winning one with Joe Montana, but then he was pushed out by the 49ers. So he's won 2 Super Bowls. He's got this great winning record, but they don't see him as the future because all he's doing is just doing what Bill Walsh is doing, and all those players are getting older. And then what's he going to do? They wanted Steve Mariucci, so they pushed out George Seifert, in part because they felt he'd been riding Walsh's coattails. And because of that, no one wanted to hire him. You imagine this. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's got this incredible win-loss record. Nobody is interested in hiring him. Eventually, a few years later, the Carolina Panthers hire him. They'd been in the NFC Championship game a few years earlier, but they'd taken a step back. With Seifert, they never had a winning record, let alone make the playoffs, and he was fired after a 1-15 season. So he's got this great winning percentage as a head coach in the NFL. But if you look at his college and NFL record, outside of working with Bill Walsh's roster, his record is 22-50. So I think he's a little bit Barry Switzer, except Barry Switzer deserves a lot of contempt, whereas George Seifert doesn't. But I know he's got 2 rings, but my God, he should every day look at those and think, if it wasn't for Bill Walsh, I would not have even seen one of these.
Oh, see, I find it hard to put him in because he was the guy who sort of was responsible for starting the Steve Young era at the Niners. And, I know that he headed to Montana, but I just, for me personally, I don't think I could put anyone who's won 2 Super Bowls, in my opinion. I think it's hard enough to win 1 Super Bowl, let alone 2. So I personally didn't even think about George Seifert.
Not that hard if you've got Joe Montana and Steve Young and that roster. Either of us could do it, I think.
You look at we talked about Mike McCarthy before, how Aaron Rodgers only made 1 Super Bowl, not just 1. He only made 1. So the fact that he had these great players, Jordy Nelson and Aaron Rodgers and whoever else they had in the Packers, and only won 1 Super Bowl. And I feel like the fact he won 2 in a albeit a non-salary cap era, I just feel like I don't think I could put him in myself, but I kind of think that maybe if we're going by people who won more than 1 Super Bowl, maybe he would be in the top 2. But, I find it hard personally, but I get where you're coming from. I absolutely get where you're coming from. I think that there's definitely what's the word, merit in what you're saying, and I feel like it's definitely a worthwhile contender. But I just have this whole method of not having anyone who's won more than 1.
I respect that.
Yeah. But I do get exactly what you're saying. So my third contender is going a bit after Seifert. Now this guy won his only ever Super Bowl in the 2000 season. I'm going for former Baltimore Ravens head coach Brian Billick. Now, if you take away his 2000 season when he won the Super Bowl against the Giants, was it against the Giants?
Yep.
It was. He has only won 1 more playoff game, and that was the year later. In the 6-7 years that followed, he made 2 playoff appearances, lost both of them, had just 3 winning seasons after winning the Super Bowl, and he did a lot for the Ravens franchise, got him that first ring. But I just feel like, again, he's had almost as many winning seasons as losing seasons as an NFL head coach. 80 wins, 64 losses, 0 ties. I just feel like you compare that sort of record against a lot of these coaches, like, think about Bill Belichick's record, Chuck Noll, all the best coaches, Don Shula. it's incomparable for all the Super Bowl winning head coaches. I feel like his record as a coach, only won the division twice in 9 years as a head coach. And yeah, I just feel like 5 out of the 9 seasons were not even in the playoffs. So for me, yeah, he is a worthwhile contender.
Yeah, he was on my kind of slam dunk list as well. He was a brilliant offensive coordinator before he was at the Ravens, and then he was just a fine head coach. And here's the thing, if you're brilliant at one side of the ball, if you become a head coach and that side of the ball is doing none of the heavy lifting, then how great can you be as a head coach? So that 2000 Ravens team had one of the greatest defenses of all time, but the offense was average at best. He just couldn't make an offense really tick in Baltimore. Those teams were constantly carried by the defense, and he was an offensive minded guy. So we all know that 2000 Ravens team was all about the defense, which was not his doing. And like you say, one postseason win after that Super Bowl. He was there for 9 seasons. They only made the playoffs 4 times in that span. I think an offensive genius as a coordinator. And when you hear him talk about offensive game plans, he understands the game on a completely different level. But as a head coach, he cannot hold a candle to some of the others, well, most of the others who also have won a Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Right, on to your 4th nominee, Ben. Who is this going to be?
Okay, let's get Doug Peterson out of the way. So he's got to be one of the only head coaches to have a Super Bowl ring and an overall losing record as a head coach. Only 8 seasons as a head coach, but 2 of them were 4-season wins. Like, you are twice as likely to get a 4-season win out of Doug Peterson as you are to get a Super Bowl. Both times those 4-win seasons got him fired. Other than the Super Bowl season, which was a real lightning in a bottle moment with Nick Foles, that season could have fallen apart and it all went crazy and the Eagles just managed to do things nobody thought they were going to be able to do. Apart from that season, he's never reached 10 regular season wins in a season. When the Jags hired him, they thought they were getting 2017 Peterson, but instead they got 2020 Peterson, the one that gets 4 wins. Doug Peterson is not a good head coach when you compare him to other Super Bowl winners. And I know that for a long time, Eagles fans were happy to defend him. I think they look back now and think, I'm glad we do not have Doug Peterson. And nobody seems to really want Doug Peterson now.
Yeah, absolutely worthwhile contender. I mean, the fact he had 2 different spells as head coach that soured towards the end is the thing itself. I mean, how the NFL sort of landscape has gone since. The fact he tried to bench Jalen Hurts for Carson Wentz seems crazy now. Think back to that final game of the season. Was it 2020 or 2019 where he decided to bench Jalen Hurts in the final game of the season? And looking back at what's happened since and how the Eagles have been since Peterson left, is a whole different ballgame. And he got lucky in the year they won it because they had to play Case Keenum. I mean, it was a year we had Blake Bortles, Case Keenum, Nick Foles, and Tom Brady. But you think about, Peyton Manning year after year facing Tom Brady, Josh Allen year after year facing Patrick Mahomes, and he got to face Case Keenum. And the Philly special was great, but that wasn't him. It was Nick Foles' idea to do that. It wasn't. Doug Peterson did not have that play drawn up. He was not planning it. If you watch the mic'd up moment when he's talking to him, Nick Foles goes, "Do you want Philly?" And not any point did Doug Peterson suggest that. He could, if he hadn't done that. I mean, his recent trajectory suggests that he would have gone for it on 4th anyway. But he didn't decide to make that play. It was Nick Foles' decision. So I think, yeah, he won a Super Bowl. But yeah, I think the way it's gone since, and to me, it's not at all a good head coach. And yeah, not really. I can see him getting a job again because he has, he's won games, suppose, in his career. But even the playoff win against the Chargers, that was extremely fortunate. That was down to a Chargers collapse.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, you lose that game, and it would have probably been And from being, and they got lucky as well. They even got into the playoffs. I believe, if I'm right in saying this, the Titans were massively ahead in the division, and they collapsed. The Jacks snuck in. They played the Chargers. The Chargers collapsed in that game. Herbert had an awful second half, and for me, he's just been extremely fortunate that Nick Foles decided to become prime Tom Brady for about two weeks. So not at all. He might be number one. He may be number one. Now I've got a few guys. I've got 2 picks left. I'm hoping you choose one of them, because I'm torn between 3 head coaches here to choose.
I'm the same. I've got this list of. I've been through my biggest ones, and now it's going to be a tough decision for the ones I have left.
See, okay, I'll keep this guy because he had a famous team. I'm going to go for a guy. It may surprise people. I'm going to go for Ben. You're going to hate this. I'm going for Mike Ditka.
He was on my long list as well, and I've got reasons. Yeah.
I mean, you look at not even going into the whole his win-loss record and stuff like that. The Ricky Williams trade alone should get you in this top 10. I mean, to trade your whole draft stock for Ricky Williams
and next year's first rounder as well,
and how I went for both of them since. I mean, Williams had a good career, but that was mainly not in New Orleans. That was in Miami. I mean, his actual regular season record is pretty good. I mean, look about the time with the Bears: 106 wins, 62 losses. Had many winning seasons. Only had 3 losing seasons out of 10 as a Bears head coach, and I think personally is responsible for having one of the best ever single seasons as a team. That Bears 85 team was tremendous. But his record in the playoffs, which is, we're talking about Super Bowl winners, we're talking about how they do in the playoffs. 6-6 in his career as a NFL head coach, and you take away that one season of the Bears, he goes 3-6 in the postseason, and the Saints have 3 years there, 15 wins and 33 losses. So for me, Mike Ditka probably isn't going to be number 1 for me, and probably isn't going to be even top 5 worst coaches, but I think certainly deserves to be in the top 10, because I think it's sort of almost like a one-season wonder a little bit. I mean, I know if you look at their playoff record, first 2 years didn't make it. They lost to the 49ers in the championship game. Then they Super Bowl champions, and they lost in the divisional round. Lost again the following year both times to the Redskins. Lost the following year to the NFC Championship game, and then divisional round 2 years later, wildcard round the year after that. So still getting to the playoffs, but it's a bit like Mike Tomlin, really. All good get there, but if you keep missing out and losing in playoff games early on, or not making a big game, then that becomes a little bit after a while, a bit tiring for fans. So, Mike Ditka for me, not a great postseason record. That aforementioned trade definitely deserves to be in the top 10 for me.
Well, one of the 85 Bears, Sean Gale, said that Ditka was the reason the Bears won that Super Bowl and the reason why they didn't win another one. Now, when Ditka took over in Chicago, they were really struggling. Within a few years, they won a Super Bowl. They then set a record for most regular season wins over a 3 or 4 year span. I can't remember what it is, but they were just incredibly consistent. But he couldn't adapt like the other greats around at that time, especially in the NFC, Bill Parcells, Joe Gibbs, and Bill Walsh. He would come up against those superior head coaches in the playoffs, and they would outsmart him pretty much every time, with the exception of 85. So he had a real issue going head to head with them. He was an offensive-minded head coach with an average offense, which is, again, what I'd said about Brian Billick. If no one's going to say Ditka was an offensive genius, but if that's your speciality, that side of the ball needs to be better. Now, the 85 team obviously had Buddy Ryan's defense, was historic, the best of all time because of its playmaking ability. But in terms of yards and points allowed, the 86 defense under Vince Tobin, who took over after Buddy Ryan left to become head coach of the Eagles, that 86 defense was in some ways better. It wasn't as aggressive. And if Tobin had coached the Bears defense against the Dolphins in 85, the Bears would have won that game, and they might have been the first 18-0 team. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's all this stuff about, well, Buddy Ryan, if Buddy Ryan hadn't left, the Bears might have won more Super Bowls. Maybe. But the Vince Tobin Bears defense was also absolutely fantastic. The defense didn't really take a step back. And despite that, Ditka could never get the team back to a Super Bowl. He only had one signature kind of playoff win after that Super Bowl, and it was the Fog Bowl against Buddy Ryan's Eagles. So he really didn't get on with Buddy Ryan, even when they were coaching together. So that was a big deal for him, beating the Eagles in the playoffs. But it was still never enough because he wasn't beating those elite coaches. And then, like you say, when he went to the Saints, that's one of the worst, if not the worst, draft trades of all time, which was unforgivable then. And then in hindsight, it's even worse because to give up what he gave up, I think Ricky Williams would have had to have had a Tom Brady-esque career to be like, well, yeah, you trade away everything for one player. That's how good they have to be. He could never be as good as that. And as it is, like you say, he only really found proper form once he left New Orleans and went to Miami. So Ditka was on my long list. I didn't think you were going to say him, especially when you said not him because he's got a famous team. I thought you meant then the 85 Bears. I see where you're coming from. Enough that he was on my long list, but I probably wouldn't have been saying him myself.
Fair enough. I'll put one more hat in the ring. The fact that you mentioned that Dolphins lost. They only lost in the regular season. The Patriots, who they played in the Super Bowl, beat the Dolphins in the championship game. And Patriots came out in that game and did nothing against the Bears, albeit down to a good defense. But I do think that if the Dolphins beaten, I know it's a lot of ifs and buts, if the Dolphins beaten Patriots in that AFC Championship game, they may not even won the Super Bowl. He may not have been someone we're talking about in this episode. He may have not even been in the Hall of Fame had the Dolphins actually won that game and maybe beaten them in the Super Bowl. But who knows? That's a lot of ifs.
Yeah, that's the greatest Super Bowl that we never got to see. Because that Dolphins team was absolutely fantastic, and it was the only team that gave the Bears a game all season. And obviously it was a long time ago, but imagine that now. Imagine having it where there's clearly these two juggernauts, and it's like, well, they're going to face in the Super Bowl, and is it going to be the Dolphins beat them for a second time, or are the Bears going to get revenge? And then it's like, oh, somehow the Dolphins have lost to a team that they beat every single year at home. They obviously the same division as the Patriots. They used to beat them every single year at home, and somehow they picked that day to flop. And we missed out on what could have been one of the greatest Super Bowls. And you're right, a very real possibility that we're not saying the 85 Bears are the greatest team of all time. We're not even putting Ditka on this list because Don Shula and Dan Marino may have ruined it.
It reminds me of the 2018 season where you had the Chiefs Rams game in the week 6 or 7, whatever it was that season, the 54-51 game, and they're both playing in the championship game, and we were thinking, we could get a repeat of this in the Super Bowl. Turns out the Rams win in controversial style, the Chiefs lose in overtime, and we get a damp squid of a game between the Patriots and the Rams. And I feel like that might be a topic for next offseason, is the top 10 best Super Bowls we never got, because certainly those will be on that list.
Book me in for that, Andy. I love it.
Absolutely. So you're on to your final selection in our list. Who is your final nominee for this list?
Oh man, I've got a whole list of people who I may at the end say who missed the cut, or I may decide to just keep my mouth shut. And I've got all these names. I'm going to go with John Gruden. And I think that John Gruden gets overrated because of his career in the media, that he has had his face out there. And, nowadays he's been beset by scandals and people don't really like him. But putting that aside, there was a period where people felt, oh, John Gruden, what a coach. One of the best coaches in the NFL of recent decades. But in how many seasons did he win a playoff game in his whole career? Andy? Joke. Throw a number out. How many seasons did he win a playoff game?
Well, I will say that I had John Gruden in my top 10 people. I had down he had 6 winning seasons in 15.
Yep, I got that stat. Yep, 6 in 15. That's not great.
No.
Okay, he had 3. There were 3 seasons where he won a playoff game, and that isn't great if you're looking at the greatest head coaches. His record as a Raiders head coach, 2 stints there, 62 and 59. And then with the Tampa Bay Bucks, 60 and 57. He won a Super Bowl, obviously, with the Bucks against his old team, the Raiders, but that was Tony Dungy's amazing defense that had been built there that he got over the line. So he can't take all the credit for it. And it was just the more I looked into it and the more I delved in, that I thought John Gruden deserves to be on this list, and he might be one of the most overrated by all of us in the last couple of decades, looking at him and being like, you know what? He's a decent head coach. He's a good head coach, but he was never a great head coach. Never.
Yeah, I agree. It's again, it goes down to that thing I've been saying all episode is these guys aren't bad coaches necessarily. They've all won Super Bowls, but trying to get a top 10 and someone's got records, stats like that, it's definitely worth putting him in. So I think, he is another worthwhile contender. And I think, maybe sometimes you feel like because he's so loud and he can't miss him in sort of mic'd up moments. And he is one of the best coaches for that. Think about, I'm not the biggest mic'd up fan, but you watch people on mic'd up and he is one of the best to watch,
very entertaining. Very entertaining.
Yeah. And I kind of, obviously, if you're taking away his emails and text, he's entertaining. You think on his work now at Barstool, his work with the quarterback, I forgot what it's called now. I think he does pre-draft with quarterbacks. That thing's really good to watch when you watch the quarterbacks coming up in the drafts, going through tactics with him. And when you watch him on the draft years ago on the draft coverage, he is really good for TV. But as a head coach, yeah, you can't argue with those stats. Now, I'm torn between 2 people now as my final one. Now, I'll give you both of them because I think it'll add some suspense to my final pick. So my 2 I'm torn between are Dick Vermeil and Gary Kubiak. Now, going on to Vermeil, first of all, the reason I wanted to consider him is because he had only 11 more wins and losses in the regular season, only 1 more win than loss in the playoff in his entire career. He had 7 losing seasons. Had a 13-year coaching break, which I didn't realize, and then he had 3 winning seasons in the last 9 of his time as head coach, and he had 7 winning seasons in total in 15 years as a head coach. But the one thing that could keep him out of the top 10 is that Greatest Show on Turf, because that was one hell of a team to watch. Whereas Gary Kubiak only had 7 more wins and losses in his career, 82 wins, 75 losses. Only had 3 in 10 years. Only had 3 playoff seasons and only 5 winning seasons. And also, he won for me in my 14 years, 15 years watching the sport. He won for me the worst Super Bowl I've ever watched. That Broncos Seahawks game. I mean, everyone talked about it. We talked about the Rams Patriots earlier, and everyone talked about that one. But at least it was tight. Whereas I feel the Eagles Chiefs most recently, and it's the Broncos Seahawks game. It's just so one-sided. And when you think about
it was atrocious. It was atrocious as a spectacle. It was atrocious. You're right.
Very first play, safety from Peyton Manning, and that was almost the omen of the whole game. I think that and sorry, no, it wasn't that one. They lost that one, didn't they? My bad. They actually lost the worst Super Bowl to the Seahawks. I'm thinking of one when they beat the Panthers. My bad. Sorry, guys. It's 8:00 at night.
Yeah.
Into fog. But either way, even excluding that non-Super Bowl he didn't win, that coaching record isn't great. But I think I'm gonna go for Dick Vermeil. I think I had more there to suggest he should be in the top 10 because he had the Greatest Show on Turf, and again almost lost that one with the Kevin Dyson 1 yard short play for the Titans. It could have easily been a loss for the Rams, and for me, he also had a part, I think he was still there at this point, in allowing the Patriots dynasty to begin. if you won that game, I may not be subjected to a lot of years of pain by the Patriots. So, Dick Vermeil will be my nomination. Now, I want to quickly go through some honourable mentions. Only really one that has
dishonourable, surely at this point, dishonourable.
Dishonourable, yeah. I got two. Actually, no, I'm not going to say two of these. These two will get a lot of pain. You know what? What the hell? It's a. I think
say it. Speak your truth.
I think one was. It's probably sounds really bad. Mike Tomlin is one of them. I did think about because he's not won a playoff game since 2016. It's a lot of 9-8 seasons, losing in the wild card round. But I felt like he made 2 Super Bowls. He's never had a losing season. I can't put him in, even if really 9-8 seasons.
It's the lack of losing seasons that kept him off my list. It's that rather than the highs. It's the lack of lows.
The other one, again, I could be. Tony Dungy was one. I felt like if you
I had him. I made loads of notes on Tony Dungy. Loads of okay. Let me go through my notes then. Right. Let's just say Tony Dungy. He's not being put forward, but I'll say him anyway. So, as I said, he built a really good defense in Tampa Bay, and that's how Gruden won a Super Bowl. And that defense was highly influential, but he couldn't get the offense right. Only had 2 playoff wins there, 1 division title for him. He was fired, got the Colts job, inherited Peyton Manning. He was there 7 seasons and only won playoff games in 3 of those seasons, which is not great if you've got Peyton Manning. And people often say the reason that Dungy, Manning, and the Colts didn't have more success in the postseason is because Brady, Belichick, and the Patriots were dominant. That's not exactly true because, yes, they were dominant, but Dungy and Manning only faced Belichick and Brady 3 times ever in the playoffs. They won 1 and lost 2. So it's not like every year they would come up against the Patriots and lose. They only ever lost 1 AFC championship game to the Patriots. So there was only this one time that it was like, they stopped us in the AFC championship game. Otherwise, we would have gone to the Super Bowl and won it. No, it was losing to teams that they shouldn't have lost to, which they would do in the playoffs so often. And that's why Dungy was on my long list. I didn't end up having to say his name, and now I've just completely crapped over his record. He's a Hall of Fame head coach, and I've made him out to be terrible. But he had Manning, and he was not good in the postseason. And that gets you consideration on my list.
Absolutely. Right, so let's go through our, before we go and try and get our table from 10 to 1, let's try and go through quickly who both of us had in our top 10. So, Ben, you picked Don McCafferty, Barry Switzer, George Seifert, Doug Peterson, and John Gruden. And I had Mike McCarthy, Brian Billick, Chris Eubank, Eubank. Imagine Chris Eubank as a head coach.
That would be. I would love. That I would love. We talked about how entertaining John Gruden was. Yeah. Put Chris Eubank with a headset on, get him mic'd up, and get him coaching a team. I'm surprised NFL UK haven't thought of doing this for a kind of charity game before an international series game. They can have the idea for free.
It would be incredible. You think about the kind of words he uses. Imagine imagine your quarterback and you're hearing the head coach call you plays, and he's like, "That's an absolutely stupendous play." I can't do the accent, but I would love to. I think that would be. I'd love to deep dive on Chris Eubank as a head coach in the NFL. That would be quite something. Because even though he's very eloquent and very posh, he's a boxer. He's got that edge to him. Even though he's quite a soft soul, he's got that edge to him. You know that you've seen him when he's the whole stuff we've seen with his son and all the pre-fight stuff. He's still got that edge by him. So I feel like you wouldn't want to mess with him. You wouldn't want to play badly for him. So I feel like, he may be,
there's, if you're interested in finding more about Chris Eubank, listeners, there's a great documentary called 4 Kings, which is about Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, Frank Bruno, and Lennox Lewis, and they're kind of like their peak in the 90s. And there was a particular point in 1991 where they both were all four of them were fighting that weekend. Eubank against Ben in Manchester, Frank Bruno against Lennox Lewis in Cardiff. This one weekend of like the two biggest British boxing fights in years. They're happening like the same weekend. But yeah, Chris Eubank is very interesting on that. So yeah, Four Kings. Once you've listened to this podcast, watch Four Kings.
I'm asked to do it myself, actually. Mike Ditka and Dick Vermeil were the other two that I picked. So now we're going to have to try and get our top 10 from 10 to 1. Now, as we always do, we'll give both of us a chance to name one person we want to have in top 5 no matter what, and one coach we want to have in our bottom 5, or happy to concede in the bottom 5. So Ben, name me one of your top 5, one of your 5 picks, I should say, that you feel should be in the top 5 no matter what, and one you'd like to see, you'd happy to concede, them being in the bottom 5.
And when we say top 5, we mean top 5 worst, right?
Yeah.
Barry Switzer, I have to have in my top 5. And George Seifert, even though I made an absolute watertight case against the 2-time Super Bowl champion George Seifert, I will concede that he shouldn't be in the top 5, and he can be in the bottom 5 of our worst 10.
Fair enough. Well, I think my shooting for me, I feel like has to be Mike McCarthy. I feel like he is someone that I feel like, despite the winning record, I feel like he is someone I feel needs to be in the top 5. And then bottom 5, happy to concede. Maybe 4. No, because I think he had. Maybe I'll go for Mike. No, not Mike Ditka.
Yeah, Mike Ditka. That's who you mean.
Maybe I'll go Dick Vermeil because I couldn't decide whether to put him in at the end. So I'll put him in bottom 5. So that means we've got try and get from 10 to 5. Now, maybe because we've had those two in our bottom 5, maybe we'll have them 10 and 9, whichever way around. I don't mind putting in which way around, but
I think Vermeil is better. Let's put Vermeil at 10, Seifert at 9. I want to give some credit to the coaches who really kind of, I guess, built up a team, which is what Vermeil did. And although Ditka just couldn't get past those better head coaches, he did build that Bears team that were in contention through the entire decade. So I would say him at 8. So Vermeil 10, Seifert 9, Ditka 8.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm perfectly happy with that. Now, if you go elsewhere, I mean, the problem is they are all good in their own right. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's just so tricky. It's so tricky. All right, well, look, let's go the other direction.
Okay,
right?
Let's go. So we got our top 5 is Switzer and McCarthy. I feel like
surely Doug Peterson's got to be in there.
Peterson. I feel like John Gruden's been a good. So I think John Gruden and Doug Peterson, I think, should be in our top 5. I feel like they are 2 really good candidates. And then maybe at number 5, maybe we put someone like maybe Weeb Eubank 5th.
Do you know what? Because he's got those 2 NFL titles before the Super Bowl. That's what I think keeps him out of that top 5.
Maybe we'll put him 7 then. Maybe put Eubank 7th. And not Chris Eubank.
Yeah.
Weeb Eubank.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay, so that means we've got McCarthy, Switzer, Doug Peterson, and John Gruden in our top 5. So we've got one more.
I think Don McCafferty then. Let's put Don McCafferty in that top 5 because he only won a Super Bowl because of Don Shula, and then he couldn't win again.
Okay, so I'll put him a 5th, and then we can choose between Switzer, McCarthy, Peterson, and Gruden for our top 4, which means one more person is in here. Oh, Brian Billick will go 6 then. Yeah, so Brian Billick will go 6. So that means so far we've got Vermeil at 10, Seifert at 9, Ditka at 8, Weeb Eubank at 7, Brian Billick at 7 or 6. Oh, my auto-spell on my phone has told me something else, which I can't say on camera for Brian Billick. Don McCaffrey's in the 5th. Which means you've got, Barry Switzer, Mike McCarthy, Doug Peterson, and John Gruden as the top four. And if I'm honest, I don't think I could. I think there's a viable case for any of these four, like we had in our last episode when me and Sam Morse went through our top 32 quarterbacks in the league. We found the top four incredibly hard to pick between.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's the same here. I think all four of them, whether it's McCarthy, Switzer, Peterson, or Gruden, I think they've all got valuable cases to be the worst. And I kind of feel like out of all the four, maybe Gruden's the least bad of the four.
Maybe. Yeah, I think that's fair. Gruden 4. I think I would think the same thing.
So that means we've got Mike McCarthy, Doug Peterson, and Barry Switzer as our three left to try and pick number one. Now, what we can try and do, each name, one person we feel like needs to be in the top three no matter what. Is there one?
Yes.
The top two, is there one of those head coach out of this top three that you feel has to be the first or second?
I think Switzer, in part because every player seemed to feel that he was holding the team back. And when players think that about the coach, that is an atrocious state of affairs.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it's the same thing with Peterson. I mean, the fact that he's had so many soured relationships in two different spells, I feel like for me, the fact his record is so bad and he got so fortunate in his Super Bowl win, I feel like that's the top two. So I think I'll put Mike McCarthy 3 because he did have a good regular season record. His win record is pretty good. So I'll put him 3, and then that means we've got to pick between Barry Switzer and Doug Peterson as our worst.
And these may be the only two on our list who I look at them and I think, well, I say that I don't know enough about Don McCafferty. I'm not that old, but of these two, I do look at them and think, how did you win a Super Bowl? And it was just being in the right place at the right time for Switzer, and for Peterson, just breaks happening all over the place. Whereas a better head coach wouldn't have needed those breaks. They would have just won the games, and he needed it. So yeah, I think they are the two worst. It's just a matter of an order. And I don't, a part of me felt strongly about Switzer, but the more I think about Peterson, I think he's got a great claim for top spot.
Yeah, because I think
I wouldn't want to be here because the host has to decide, really.
Okay, the power's with me again. Do we go Peterson or do we go Barry Switzer?
Now, Peterson could end up coming back and having a good career, or he could just come back and be even worse. True.
You know what I think could be a deciding factor is that no one has said that Peterson cost them multiple Super Bowls.
That's true.
The fact that a Hall of Fame quarterback who's won enough anyway, he's got enough Super Bowls anyway to contend with, had a great life. The fact that he could have won 2 or 3 more, which also, in a way, it's sort of like a butterfly effect, helped George Seifert become one of our top 10 worst in this list.
Yeah.
So I think we'll put Barry Switzer first, and we'll put Doug Peterson second.
What a list! What a list!
It's a who's who of Dross head coaching. So we'll go for the top 10 again. So from 10 to 1 is Dick Vermeil, George Seifert, Mike Ditka, Weeb Eubank, Brian Billick, Don McCafferty, John Gruden, James McCarthy, and then Mike McCarthy, Doug Peterson, and Barry Switzer as number 1. But do let us know in the comments as well. And don't forget to leave some 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and comment on Spotify or YouTube about, is anyone we missed out on? Is there any people we've talked about where we've missed out on? Did he place anyone a bit too high, a bit too low in our top 10? Do let us know on socials or on YouTube. But that is the end of the episode. So, Ben, once again, thank you for coming on.
I love it. And we always end up having a discussion about something that I find really, really difficult to do. Like when we did the ranking, the games we were most looking forward to, it was a joy, but also really painful trying to narrow it down. And this has been the same. And, we're recording this in the evening. I have been thinking about this so much all day. It has just dominated my day. Honestly, I cannot tell you. So I've loved that process.
We'll have it all over again next year when we do have this, promised episode of having the top 10 Super Bowls we never got to see, which I think is actually going to be really, really exciting to see what we come up with. But we've got a whole year to plan for that, so that's all to come. And Ben, now I've mentioned before on the show that I won't be at the college game because we did book tickets for Coldplay before realising what date it was. I won't be seeing you in Dublin for that, but hopefully I'll be seeing you in Dublin for the Steelers-Vikings game and also for the London games. And hopefully I will see you there.
Yeah, great selection of games. We're lucky to have them this side of the Atlantic, and long may it continue.
Absolutely. And for those watching at home, don't forget we have asked a quiz question, so that'll be coming up in our next episode. And yeah, we're having a slight couple of weeks break before we then kickstart our bonanza of a month where we're going through each team, a season preview with a fan of that team. So keep an eye out for that on your favourite team and seeing who is coming on and what prediction we give for your team season. But in the meantime, this is the Across the Pod NFL podcast with, as ever, your host, Andy Davis. And don't forget to use code Andy5 at checkout at Fantasy Game Day app to be my guest today, Ben Isaacs. And we will see you next time.